Hey adventurers, so today is going to be my adventure through Arthurian Lit so far, part 2. The first video in this series that I made was back in it was like December of 2021, or maybe even January of 2022. So it's been a while since I made that video, and I need to continue on with this, with talking about these Arthurian literatures that I have read and loved, or read at least. This is basically just me documenting my journey through Arthurian literature. I'm not going to really go over my thoughts regarding the books that I talked about in the first part. You can go watch that first part, I'll have it linked. But I've got thoughts regarding books, and so I'm going to talk about the Arthurian literature books that I have read since then. I've got like 6 of them, 7 of them I guess, and I'll just go through my thoughts on those. And the ones that I talked about in that first video are Sir Gawain and the Green Knight by Tolkien, and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight as translated by Winnie. So there's a Tolkien translation and a Winnie translation that I've read both of, so I talked about both of those. Then I read La Morte d'Arthur by Sir Thomas Malory, and I talked about that, and Tristan with Tristram of Thomas, which is the story of Tristan or Tristram and Isolde or Isolda, or is a whole bunch of different variations on the names of both of those characters, and it's their story. So I read that one and talked about that one. And then Culhwch and Olwen, which is a old Welsh tale, super short. It would be considered a short story by today's standards, and I talked about that one as well. Since then, I have read several more books, and I'll pull them out as I get to them and start talking about them. But I've read Gerzo by Anonymous, and Gawain by J.P. Harker, and Soldier's Garden by Jack Vance, and Badon Hill by Anonymous, and The Green Pearl by Jack Vance, and Maduke by Jack Vance, and The Once and Future King by T.H. White, minus the Book of Merlin, because I don't have that one in the book that I read from. So I won't be talking about that. So those are the books that I have read and will be talking about specifically in this video. Before I get into that though, I've got a couple other books that I have that have some kind of Arthurian ties that I will just briefly mention, go through. They aren't Arthurian, but they've got some tie-ins or references to and stuff like that. So the first one is Howl's Moving Castle by Diane Wynne Jones. The characters use names from Arthurian stories. It's not really closely connected, but they do exist. The Wheel of Time, there's lots of characters and events that are references to Arthurian literature. Arthur Hawkwing Pendraig or something like that. I forget how his name is pronounced. In fact, I don't know that I know how his name is pronounced, but obviously Arthur Pendragon. We've got most of the characters. Tom Merlin, it's a Merlin. We've got a Gawain and a Galad, so Gawain and Galahad and stuff like that. There's just lots of names. Nynaeve and Nimue. I don't know. I don't remember who the character correlations are supposed to be, but there's lots of names that are supposed to be obviously related to the Arthurian story. Different turnings of the wheel, essentially. So yeah, Wheel of Time has a lot of stuff that is in many ways retellings of Arthurian stuff. It's a bit closer connected because it's supposed to be, but it's really not Arthurian at all. It's completely different. And then the Sum of All Men, which is Rune Lords, has some Arthurian imagery as well, to some degree, with the Green Man is a important symbol. Obviously that is not just Arthurian, that's mythology, but specifically the Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, that Green Man imagery it's just a tie-in to each other. It's really not closely connected at all. There's some other minor imagery in Rune Lords that I don't remember off the top of my head, but I remember noticing it as I was reading through. So let's get right into my thoughts on these books though. So the first one that I read, and I'll talk about Gerzo and Badon Hill at the same time because it's book 1, book 2 in the series The Wars of Wrath by Anonymous. So book 1 is Gerzo. This one is not so much focused on the Arthurian side of things. It is to some degree, but we have 2 main characters in this first book. One is George of Bertilac. So this character is, Bertilac is the Green Knight, and George is the Saint George that slays the dragon from that tale. So obviously that's directly connected to Arthurian literature. It's purposefully part of Arthurian literature here. And then the other main character is a princess from Libya, Princess Sabra. So this first book doesn't, it focuses more on Sabra's storyline than George's storyline, but they definitely are both being told at the same time, and it's definitely an important part. Badon Hill, on the other hand, kind of takes the focus to the Arthurian side of things. We get basically most of the story is then in Britain, telling the story of the Saxon invasion, telling the story of the Battle of Mount Badon. Obviously, that's why it's titled Badon Hill. For those who don't know, Mount Badon is one of the stories of Mount Badon are the historical references that people in real life have written regarding Mount Badon. There's two of them that specifically mention a great warrior and leader named Arthur who kills a whole bunch of people. So that's where that Badon Hill comes from. I haven't read either of those. I need to. I saw the reason that I know about them and that I know that they exist and that's the case is because I was watching, and I still haven't finished the video by him, but I was watching Ralph Blutax's video on the Arthurian mythology, Arthurian literature, the importance of it. It's a great video, and I've only watched like an hour of it, of the 4 that are there or something like that, or maybe even only like 40 minutes of it. Either way, it's very in-depth, and I want to go back and continue it, and I haven't gotten the chance to yet. But he was talking about those, and so that's how, as soon as he said Badon Mount, I was like, oh, so that's where that name comes from. I've probably heard it in the past in my Arthurian Lit class that I talked about in my first adventure through Arthurian Lit video. I'm sure we talked about it in there, and I just don't remember everything about it. But it's an important moment for Arthurian literature because it actually mentions Arthur. So that's what Badon Hill is. It deals a lot with the events surrounding the Battle of Mount Badon. Okay, so I guess I can talk. I should talk about this. I really enjoy this series. It's a little bit grimdark for my tastes, but obviously it's Arthurian, so I love that. And it's really very steeped in historical accuracy, and I love that. And so it's very historical, it's very Arthurian, and so both of these books have been really good. They're short, they're like less than, 256 pages for Gerzo. I don't actually have a physical copy of Badon Hill yet, but I need to get one. Eventually I will. I just haven't done it yet. I don't know when book 3 is coming out. I haven't talked to the author in a while, and I need to reach out and see what's going on there. But I do have really enjoyed these 2 books, and I want to continue on with this series whenever the next book comes out, and I will be for sure. I guess let's continue on. We've got Gawain by J.P. Harker. This is a kind of a young adult retelling of the Gawain and the Green Knight story. It's very much a retelling. What the phrase that I use for it is a different cycle, and that is the reason why I use that phrase is because that is the phrase used in Arthurian literature. We have so I talked about this with the Tristan with Tristram and Thomas in my last video, and those are the two stories by 2 different authors that are probably the same cycle of the Tristan story. And so that's what it is a cycle is just a retelling. Or a new turning of the wheel, as it puts it in the Wheel of Time series. It's just another version of that same story. And so the Gawain by J.P. Harker is another telling of the Gawain and the Green Knight story, and I really like that. The Sir Gawain and the Green Knight it's right up there at the top of my favorite stories. I was excited to see how J.P. Harker could retell this story, make it a little bit more YA. There's a lot in this that I really like. We get a lot of Gawain. It's obviously a much younger Gawain. It's before the court of Arthur is established. I think it's even before. I believe it's before Arthur is even king. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I do have a few minor issues with it, but I also have a review of this one, so you can go watch the review, and that will give you much more of my thoughts on it. It's been a while now since I read this, but I do remember really enjoying this one, and I'm excited to see where else J.P. Harker goes with this series. I don't think it's specifically book 1 in the series, but it's going to be like the next book. I don't know if it's Lancelot. I feel like I've heard him say it's going to be book 2 is Lancelot, and book 3 is going to be a different character from King Arthur's court. And book 4, I don't know how many he's planning to write, but that's kind of the plan for it, is each book is going to follow an individual character from King Arthur's court, slowly building this great epic series from over the course of all these books, building this Arthurian mythos cycle that he wants to tell. And I'm excited for that. What have we got next? Ooh, so Soldier's Garden, The Grain, Pearl, and Madook. This is the Leoness trilogy by Jack Vance. This is one that I read with Liam from Liam's Lyceum. My brain is clearly not in it today. I listened to all three of these. The audiobooks for them are fantastic. The stories are fantastic. Very weird, very much fairy tale vibes to them a lot of the time, where things are just happening and you're just going to go with it because that's the way that these stories work. But I really enjoyed them. Vance is a brilliant writer. There's definitely some weird stuff going on in these books. Some things that I would not put in my own books if I were to write them. We'll say it that way. But there's a lot of really good storytelling as well. I love the atmosphere of them. I guess I should talk about what these books are. So the Leoness trilogy is a trilogy. It's 3 books that tell the story of the Elder Isles before they're sinking, basically it's a pre-Arthur story. It takes place, it is Arthurian, but it's Arthurian adjacent because King Arthur doesn't exist yet. I don't think Uther is even born yet. Or if he is young. And so the court of Camelot hasn't been established. So this is a story that takes place before that. It's about the dying out of magic to some degree. It's about the birth of the Atlantis story or myth. It's heavily tied into Atlantis. It's heavily tied into pre-Arthur goings on. We see a whole bunch of magicians that you can clearly tell if you look at Merlin as a magician and not as a druid. You see, okay, this is how Merlin the magician would. Or Merlin the magician is a last vestige of this magic, of this old magic that is starting to die out in this story about the Elder Isles. And so there's a lot of that going on. It's a romp, not a romp. This story really goes everywhere especially on the Elder Isles. So Leoness is one of the places that Tristan is said to be from. And so there's definitely some tie-ins in that way as well. So the Elder Isles are kind of an important part of Arthurian mythology in that they no longer exist during the reign of King Arthur type thing. So there's some really cool stuff. It's definitely Jack Vance deciding to do his own thing. I really enjoyed all 3 of them. Madook, book 3, is my favorite of the trilogy, but it could not be as good as it is without books 1 and 2. Books 1 and 2 really set the stage. They really set up things so that when they tell the story in Madook, it makes sense and it works and it can be your favorite of the trilogy. So that's another series that I've read, Arthurian, that I have read. And I liked it. The last thing that I have on this list is The Once and Future King by T.H. White, minus the 5th book, which is the Book of Merlin. This is one that I started reading before my Arthurian Lit class. I was 5 chapters in and then the class started and we started reading Le Morte d'Arthur. Was the first book we started reading. And so I was like, all right, I cannot do Le Morte d'Arthur at the same time as doing The Once and Future King. So I set it down and decided that I would come back to it later when I got back around to it. What are my thoughts on this book? Basically, there's a lot in this book that I really appreciated, really liked, and there's a lot that I didn't. And I'm excited to do a review for this because I'll have a lot more thoughts on this book once I can go into my review. But basically, I will put it fairly simply here and not really go into huge amounts of detail because I want to save a lot of my thoughts for my review when I get there. Essentially, my problem with this book is that it's trying to tell 3 different stories. There is one story that is the story that T.H. White wants to tell about his retelling of the Arthur story. That's great. That's the story, that's the part that I really, really enjoyed most of the time. There's also a story that is trying to be deeply philosophical. And T.H. White really wants it to be deeply philosophical, and he tries really hard, and he doesn't succeed, and it's not as deep as he wants it to be. And then there's a third story, which is basically a modernization of Le Morte d'Arthur. Basically, the same events that happen in Le Morte d'Arthur are put into this book. So there's those 3 stories. All of them could be great on their own, but none of them work together. And it's a weird issue that I can't say that I've ever seen before, where there's 3 distinct stories being told, none of which work with each other. And as you continue through the book, it gets better, and the further into the book, the better he does at blending those 3 things together. But at the beginning and really through to until about book 3, which is, what is book 3 called? The Ill-Made Knight, which is primarily Lancelot. So there's that. About halfway through book 3, The Ill-Made Knight, we start to get into the book where it's actually starting to work. But it's taken 3/4 of the book, or 2/3 of the book, to get to that point. And that's not okay. I know a lot of people love this book. I can see why. It's really easy to read. It's well written for the most part. But I couldn't get past the issues that I was having with it. I read the entire book, and I'm glad that I did, and I will read the Book of Merlin at some point. But it wasn't my favorite book of the Arthurian literature that I have read. And I'm glad to have read it, because now I can decide, okay, I don't really need to reread that again. I see this quote on the front. I have read this book more times than any other in my library, by Lev Grossman, who I believe he wrote the Magician's trilogy, if I remember correctly. And then there's a quote by Ursula K. Le Guin. I have laughed at White's great Arthurian novel and cried over it and loved it all my life. And I'm just like, I don't find it, I must be the stupid one in this instance, because if Ursula K. Le Guin is saying that this is brilliant, I clearly missed out on somewhere. I missed something. Yeah, so I'm gonna leave it there. That is my thoughts on The Once and Future King. Briefly, I've got more to say about it that I will say once I actually do my review. But so those are some of the continuation of the Arthurian literature journey that I have been on, and I'm loving it so much. Other than Once and Future King, which I love that I've read it. It wasn't my favorite to read. I've had such a great experience. I've got so much more to read. I have the Pendragon Cycle by Stephen R. Lawhead. I've got a whole bunch of other books. I've got one book titled, what is it called? It's a book about Mordred, Mordred's Curse, and I can't remember who it's by. Let's see if Goodreads will pull it up fast enough. Ian McDowell. Mordred's Curse by Ian McDowell. That's one that I've got on my shelf. And after reading Once and Future King, that's one thing I will say. I'm very intrigued to learn more about Mordred, because I hate him as a character, but he's so interesting. And so I'm very excited to read Mordred's Curse. I've got the Arthurian Romances by Chrétien de Troyes. That's another one that I need to read. I've just got a lot. There's Merlin's Mirror by, I can't remember who Merlin's Mirror is by, but that's like a sci-fi retelling of some stuff. Who's this one by? Is it gonna work? Andre Norton, and I thought it was by somebody else as well, but Andre Norton wrote Merlin's Mirror. So that's just a couple more of the ones that I have physically already. There's also the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. That's an Arthurian retelling that I've heard is fantastic, and so there's a lot that I have to look forward to and will continue to be reading for sure. That's just, I wanted to do a check-in with this because it's been a while since I've checked in, but I've actually read some stuff since then, and so I was wanting to do this check-in, and we've come to the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday and have our social medias linked in the description down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.